"It's time you signed a family farm over to us, Dad." Those were the words. Not question. A statement of fact, delivered over lukewarm coffee at the kitchen table my own father built. My son, Michael, said them. He didn't look at me when he did. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through something that must have been more important than the transfer of 150 years of family history. His wife, Brenda, sat across from him, stirring a packet of artificial sweetener into her cup. The little paper wrapper was already a crumpled ball next to her saucer. She was the one watching me. Her eyes were sharp, expectant, like a bird watching a worm, waiting for it to stop wriggling so it could be devoured. The silence in the kitchen wasn't a comfortable one. It wasn't the usual morning quiet, filled with the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant cawing of crows in the north pasture. This was a heavy silence, a weighted blanket of things unsaid, or rather, things said that could never be unsaid. The air grew thick with their expectation. I looked down at my own hands, resting on the worn oilcloth of the table. They were my father's hands, my grandfather's hands. Knuckles swollen with arthritis, skin like tanned leather, crisscrossed with a map of tiny white scars from a lifetime of work. A splinter from a fence post in '78. A burn from a soldering iron in '92. A deep gash from a slipped wrench just last year. Each mark a story. Each story a piece of this place. These hands had pulled calves in the dead of winter, fixed engines with nothing but wire and hope, and held my wife's hand until it grew cold in mine. Now they were just old hands, in the way of progress. Michael cleared his throat, still not looking up. "It's just simpler this way," he added, as if that explained everything. "For estate planning. Taxes. Brenda's brother is a financial advisor. He said it's the smart move. Avoids probate. He said it like it was a dirty word, a disease to be avoided. He didn't say it would make it easier for them to borrow against the land for their next business venture. He didn't say it would make it easier to sell off the lower 40 acres to the developer who'd been sniffing around for years, wanted to put up a subdivision of identical houses with names like the Willows or Oak Creek Estates, even though there wasn't a single willow on the property and the creek dried up every August. I didn't say anything. I just watched the steam rise from my coffee cup. Black, no sugar. The way I'd drunk it for 60 years. The smell was one of the few constants in my life. That, and the smell of the earth after a rain. Brenda leaned forward, her voice a carefully constructed melody of concern. "We're thinking of you, Frank. This would take so much pressure off. You wouldn't have to worry about the upkeep anymore. We can handle all of that worry." They thought I worried. I didn't worry about the farm. The farm was a part of me. Worrying about the farm would be like a man worrying about his own lungs, his own heart. You don't worry about it. You just live with it. You tend to it. You listen to its rhythms. You feel its pains and its joys as your own. The burst of green in the spring, the deep satisfaction of a full hay barn in the fall, the quiet sleep of the land under a blanket of snow. That wasn't worry. That was life. I remembered Michael as a boy, trailing behind me as I walked the fence line, his small hand in mine. He'd ask a million questions. "Why is the sky blue, Dad? How do the cows know when to come home? Can I drive the tractor?" I answered every one. I showed him how to splice a wire, how to read the clouds, how to plant a straight row of corn. I thought I was teaching him how to inherit a legacy. I see now I was just teaching him how to appraise an asset. He finally looked up from his phone. His face, which I could still see as a boy's if I squinted, was impatient. "So, we'll have the papers drawn up. We can drive you into town next week to sign them with the lawyer again. Not a question. A schedule. An appointment for my own erasure." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The heat was a familiar comfort. It burned just enough to let me know I was still here. I set the mug down on the table with a quiet click. The sound was deafening in the silence. Brenda's smile was tight. "It'll be a relief, you'll see." I looked past them, out the kitchen window. The big oak tree on the hill stood dark against the morning sky. My great-grandfather planted that tree from an acorn he carried in his pocket all the way from Ohio. He'd said a man needs to see something grow that will outlive him, a piece of himself that will offer shade to strangers long after his name is forgotten. My son saw a tree. I saw a promise. The developer who wanted the lower 40 had offered to clear-cut it, said it would improve the view for the new houses. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't a sudden crack. It was more like a slow, geological separation. A continent of memory and obligation drifting away from the mainland of my present. The hurt was there, a dull ache I'd lived with for years, a background noise I'd learned to ignore. But this was different. This was a moment of absolute, cold clarity. I saw the whole picture. The missed birthdays explained away with, "We're just so busy." The Christmases where they arrived late and left early. Their car full of expensive gifts for their own children while they handed me a gift card to a chain restaurant. The phone calls that were always about them needing something, a place to store their boat for the winter, a loan to cover a bad investment, my signature on a document I didn't fully understand. I was no longer a father. I was a groundskeeper, a custodian of their inheritance, a placeholder waiting to be removed from the equation. The question I'd heard Brenda whisper to Michael on the phone last week when she thought I was out of earshot echoed in my mind. Is he ever going to, this is just dragging on. Why is he still alive? That was the real question. I pushed my chair back from the table. The legs scraped against the linoleum, a sound of protest. I stood up. Michael finally gave me his full attention. He frowned. "Dad, did you hear me?" "I heard you," I said. My voice was steady. It surprised me. I thought it would tremble. "I need to check the pump down at the creek." Brenda's face flashed with annoyance. "Frank, this is important." "So is the pump," I said. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them sitting at my father's table. I didn't grab my jacket from the hook by the door, even though the morning air had a chill to it. I needed to feel the cold. I needed to feel something real. The screen door slapped shut behind me. The sound was a period at the end of a very long sentence. I didn't go to the pump. I walked across the yard, the damp grass soaking the cuffs of my jeans. I went to my workshop, my sanctuary. The air inside was thick with the scent of sawdust, motor oil, and time. It was the smell of my father and his father before him. It was the smell of creation and repair, a place where broken things were made whole again. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating motes of sawdust, dancing in the air like tiny spirits. Tools hung on the walls in their designated places, their outlines drawn in marker, so I'd know if one was missing. A place for everything, and everything in its place. Order. Control. I ran my hand over the scarred surface of the workbench. It was a single slab of maple, 3 inches thick, that my grandfather had salvaged from a defunct bowling alley. It had borne the weight of countless projects, from building birdhouses with my granddaughter Sarah to rebuilding the engine of my old Ford pickup truck. I wasn't angry. That was the strange part. I had expected a storm of rage, a lifetime of resentment boiling over. But there was nothing, just a profound and unsettling calm. It was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. The world was spinning around me, but right here, in this moment, there was a perfect, terrible stillness. My gaze fell upon a wooden box on a high shelf. It was dark cherry wood, dovetailed at the corners. I hadn't opened it in years. I reached up, my joints groaning in protest, and carefully took it down. I blew a layer of dust off the lid and carried it over to the workbench. Inside, nestled in worn green felt, was my father's collection of hand planes. A Stanley No. 5, a block plane, a shoulder plane. Each one perfectly maintained, the blades honed to a razor's edge, the iron bodies gleaming with a thin coat of oil. He had taught me how to use them, how to read the grain of the wood, how to shave off a curl of maple so thin you could read a newspaper through it. "You don't force it, Frank," he used to say, his voice a low rumble. "You listen to the wood. You let the tool do the work." I picked up the No. 5. The rosewood handle was smooth and dark, polished by the grip of my father's hand, and then by mine. The weight of it was substantial, solid, real. It was a tool built to last for generations. It was a tool with a purpose. I stood there for a long time, just holding it, feeling the connection to the man who gave it to me. A man who never would have spoken to his own father the way Michael had just spoken to me. My father respected the land, but he respected the man who worked it more. He believed legacy wasn't just the soil, but the sweat and the soul you poured into it. The decision settled over me. Not like a storm, but like the first snow of winter. Quietly, completely. covering everything and making it all look new and clean. It was time to let the tool do the work. I placed the plane back in its box, closed the lid, and put it back on the shelf. Then I walked over to the old rotary phone on the wall, the one I kept for emergencies. I wiped my dusty hand on my jeans and picked up the receiver. The dial tone was a loud, steady hum. A single, unwavering note. I didn't call the lawyer Michael used, the slick one in the city who specialized in wealth management. I opened the top drawer of the workbench and pulled out the thin, worn phone book for the county. I let my finger trail down the list of attorneys until I found a name that felt right. Henderson, James P. An office on Main Street in the old part town. No flashy advertisement. Just a name and a number. I dialed the number. My fingers were steady in the holes of the rotary dial. A woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. Henderson Law. I'd like to make an appointment with Mr. Henderson, I said. Regarding? I paused, looking out the window at the farm. My farm. Estate planning, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I knew, in that moment, I was finally using them for their true purpose. To plan my estate. Not my son's. Mine. The drive into town felt different that day. I'd driven this road thousands of times, but now I saw it with new eyes. I saw the way the fences sag in the west pasture, a job I'd been putting off. I saw the patch of rust on the barn roof that needed sealing before the winter rains. I saw all the work, all the unending cycles of maintenance and repair. For years, I had seen it as a burden, a duty. Now I saw it as a choice. Mr. Henderson's office was on the second floor of a brick building above the old hardware store. The stairs creaked. The air in the hallway smelled of floor polish and old paper. It was a comforting smell. He was a man about my age, maybe a few years younger. He wore a rumpled tweed jacket and had kind eyes behind thick glasses. His office wasn't fancy. It was filled with books. Floor to ceiling, books on law, history, and philosophy. A man who read was a man who thought. I trusted him immediately. He shook my hand. His grip was firm. Frank Miller, he said, reading my name from his notepad. My father bought his seed from your father for 40 years. Said he was the most honest man he ever knew. My father was a good man, I said. Please sit. He gestured to a worn leather armchair. It sighed as I sat down. What can I do for you? I didn't beat around the bush. Men of our generation rarely do. I have a son, I began. He and his wife, they want me to sign my farm over to them. Mr. Henderson listened without interrupting. He just nodded, his pen still on his notepad. He didn't write anything down yet. He just listened. It was a rare gift. I told him everything. Not the emotional parts, not the lifetime of small hurts. Just the facts. The power of attorney I'd signed a decade ago when I'd had my heart surgery. The joint bank accounts Michael had insisted on to help me manage my finances, the constant pressure to sell, to develop, to modernize. I told him about the conversation that morning. I told him the words Michael had used. It's time. When I finished, the office was quiet. The only sound was the slow tick-tock of a grandfather clock in the corner. Mr. Henderson finally picked up his pen. Frank, he said, his voice gentle but firm. What is it you want? And there it was. The question no one had asked me in 30 years. Not what they wanted from me. Not what was best for the family. What did I want? I looked out his window, down at the town square. People were coming and going, living their lives, making their own choices. First, I said, turning back to him, I want to revoke the power of attorney. Immediately, he wrote that down. Done. Second, I want my son's name taken off all my bank accounts. He wrote that down. We can do that this afternoon. Third, I hesitated. This was the big one. The idea had been a tiny seed in the workshop, but had taken root in the fertile ground of this quiet, book-lined office. It felt audacious. It felt terrifying. It felt right. I want to look into donating the farm. Mr. Henderson looked up from his pad, his eyebrows raised slightly. Donating? To whom? I don't want it developed, I said. I don't want it broken up. It's been the Miller farm for 5 generations. If it can't stay that way, then I want it to be for everyone. I want it to be a park or a preserve, something that lasts, something that can't be sold. He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. He wasn't looking at me like I was a senile old man. He was looking at me like a man considering a complex legal problem. The National Park Service has a land donation program, he said slowly. So does the state. We can explore those options. We could also set up a conservation easement. There are ways to protect the land in perpetuity. I like the sound of that word. It sounded like the oak tree on the hill. We can also structure it as a gift with a reserve life estate, he continued. That means you would donate the land now, but you would retain the right to live on it and use it for the rest of your life. Nothing would change for you day to day. But the ownership, the future of the land, would be settled. It would be out of your hands. And out of your sons, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. The constant pressure, the endless arguments, the feeling of being a gatekeeper against my own family's greed, it could all be over. That one, I said. That's what I want. He made a few more notes. This will make your son unhappy. Unhappiness is a choice, I said, the words coming from a place I didn't know existed. He's been making his. Now I'm making mine. I left his office an hour later with a list of things to do. The first stop was the bank. I walked in and sat down with the manager, a young woman with a kind smile who had helped me set up a college fund for my granddaughter, Sarah, years ago. With a few signatures on a few forms, Michael was no longer on my accounts. His access was gone. The young woman looked at me with a question in her eyes, but she didn't ask. She just stamped the papers with a satisfying thud. It felt like bolting a door. When I got home, the house was empty. Michael and Brenda's car was gone. A note was on the kitchen table. We'll be back Thursday with the papers. Let's not be difficult about this. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash can. Then I walked into the living room. The mantelpiece above the fireplace was lined with framed photographs. A history of a family in silver frames. Michael's wedding. The christening of his two sons, my grandsons, who I barely knew. Family vacations to places I was never invited to. I started at one end. I picked up the first photograph, a picture of Michael and Brenda on their wedding day. They looked happy, or at least, they looked like they were performing happiness for the camera. I opened the back of the frame, took out the picture, and slid it into the desk drawer. I put the empty frame back on a mantel. I did the same with the next one, and the next. One by one, I removed my son and his family from my line of sight. I didn't tear the photos. I didn't burn them. I just filed them away. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of curation. I was simply redesigning the space to reflect my reality. The only photos I left were the old ones. My parents on their wedding day. My wife, Eleanor, holding Michael as a baby. Her smile so genuine it hurt to look at. A picture of me in my army uniform, young and scared and trying to look brave. And one of my granddaughter, Sarah, her gap-toothed grin lighting up the whole frame. When I was done, the mantelpiece felt lighter. The room felt bigger. I could breathe. I slept better that night than I had in years. I dreamed of the farm, not as a place of work and obligation, but as a place of peace. I dreamed I was walking the fields with my father, the sun on our backs, and he was telling me I'd done a good job. The first phone call came the next morning. It was Michael. I saw his name on the caller ID. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a text message. Dad, my card was declined at the gas station. Did you change something with the account? Call me. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not replied. Deleted. It vanished from the screen as if it had never existed. The silence that followed was wonderful. An hour later, another call. This time from an unknown number. I answered it. It was a woman from the bank's fraud department, calling to confirm that I had, in fact, been the one to remove authorized user Michael Miller from my accounts. Yes, I said. That was me. And are you under any duress, Mr. Miller? She asked, her voice following script. Is anyone pressuring you to make these financial changes? I almost laughed. Ma'am, I said, for the first time in a very long time, I'm under no pressure at all. The rest of the day was a cascade of digital noise. More calls from Michael, which I ignored. Calls from Brenda, which I also ignored. A flurry of text messages, each more agitated than the last. What's going on? The lawyer's office just called. They said you revoked the POA. You can't do that. Dad, are you having some kind of episode? Do we need to come out there? This is incredibly childish. You are punishing us for trying to help you. Punishment. They saw it as punishment. They couldn't conceive of it as a consequence. They couldn't imagine that their actions had an equal and opposite reaction. They saw me not as a person, but as a system that was supposed to function for their benefit. And now, the system was malfunctioning. They were annoyed. They were inconvenienced. But I did not get the sense that they were hurt, or sad, or concerned for my well-being. They were concerned about their access. I turned the ringer on my phone off. I put the phone in a drawer in the kitchen. The silence of the house settled back in, deeper and more profound than before. I spent the afternoon in the workshop. I took down my father's hand plane again. I found a piece of scrap pine, clamped it to the workbench, and began to shave the surface. The plane whispered across the wood, peeling off a perfect, translucent curl. SHHHH, SHHHH, SHHHH. The rhythm was meditative. The scent of fresh-cut pine filled the air. With each pass, the wood became smoother, more true. With each pass, I felt my own mind becoming clearer. I was not being childish. I was not having an episode. I was simply truing the surface of my own life. I was shaving away the parts that were warped, the parts that were rough, until only the true grain remained. Late that afternoon, another call came. This time, I knew the ringtone. I had set a special one for my granddaughter, Sarah. It was the sound of a songbird. I walked back into the house, pulled the phone from the drawer, and answered it. Grandpa. Her voice was hesitant. Are you okay? Sarah was Eleanor's child, born to my daughter who had passed away far too young. She had her mother's kind heart and her grandmother's fierce spirit. She was a college student now, studying ecology. She loved the farm as much as I did, but for different reasons. She saw it not as an asset, but as an ecosystem, a living, breathing thing. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said. Just tinkering in the shop, okay, she said, though she didn't sound convinced. It's just, Uncle Michael called me. He and Aunt Brenda are freaking out. They said you're not answering your phone and that you kicked them off your bank account. I sat down in my armchair. That's true. There was a pause on the line. I could hear her thinking. He said you were being irrational. He said they're worried you're not well. And what do you think? I asked. Another pause. I think, she said slowly, that they must have done something to finally push you too far. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. To be seen, to be understood, without having to explain a lifetime of context. It was a gift beyond measure. They want me to sign the farm over to them, I said, the words coming out easily now. They told me it was time. I heard her take a sharp breath. Oh, Grandpa, I'm so sorry. There was no judgment in her voice. No calculation. Just pure, simple empathy. They have no right. They think they have every right, I said. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at the empty picture frames on the mantel. I'm making some changes, I said. I'm doing what I think is best for the land. Okay, she said immediately. Whatever you decide, I support you. Just please don't shut me out, okay? I want to know you're all right. I won't shut you out, Sarah. I promised. And I'm more than all right. I'm finally awake. We talked for a while longer about her classes, about the migrating birds she'd seen on campus. It was a normal conversation, a beautiful, ordinary conversation that had nothing to do with money or obligation. It was about connection. When we hung up, I felt a resolve of solid steel in my gut. I was doing the right thing. Thursday came, just as a note had promised. I was in the kitchen, drinking my morning coffee, when I saw their car pull into the driveway. It crunched on the gravel with an aggressive sound. I didn't get up. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, and waited. They didn't knock. Michael used his key, the one I should have taken back years ago. The door opened, and they walked in, Brenda first, followed by Michael. He was carrying a leather briefcase. They stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, seeing me sitting there. They had expected to find me confused, or sick, or perhaps contrite. They did not expect to find me calm. Dad, Michael said, his voice tight with forced patience. We were worried sick. Why haven't you been answering our calls? I've been busy, I said. Brenda's eyes scanned the room, landing on the mantelpiece in the living room beyond. I saw a flicker of confusion in her face as she looked at the empty frames. We brought the papers, Michael said, patting the briefcase. We can go over them, and then we'll drive you into town. That won't be necessary, I said. I took another sip of coffee. Michael's jaw tightened. Dad, we are not playing games here. This is for your own good, my own good, I repeated. It wasn't a question. You've been deciding what's for my own good for a long time, Michael. I've decided to take the job back. He stared at me. It was like he was seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. What are you talking about? Brenda snapped, her veneer of concern gone. What did you do? I spoke with an attorney, I said calmly. Mr. Henderson, a good man. My father knew his father. Michael's face went pale. You went to another lawyer? Why? Because my lawyer works for me, I said. I had some documents I needed drawn up. I reached over to the counter and picked up a thick manila envelope. I slid it across the table toward them. It landed with a soft, final thud. Michael looked at the envelope, then at me. He didn't touch it. What is this? That, I said, is a copy of the deed of gift I signed yesterday afternoon. The farm, all 500 acres, the house, the barns, everything has been donated to the National Park Service. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. All the air had been sucked out of the room. Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Michael just stood there, frozen, his hand still on his briefcase. You what? He finally stammered. You can't. It's our inheritance, no, son, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of a lifetime. It was my legacy. An inheritance is a right. A legacy is a gift. You don't demand a gift. You earn it. You cherish it. You're insane, Brenda whispered, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. He's lost his mind. We can fight this. We can have him declared incompetent. I don't think you can, I said. Mr. Henderson had me see a doctor for a full competency evaluation before I signed anything. I have a letter from him and from my own doctor stating that I am of perfectly sound mind. Perhaps even sounder than I have been in years. Michael finally seemed to process it. The color drained from his face, replaced by a dark, ugly flush of rage. Why? He choked out. After everything we've done for you, why would you do this to us? What have you done for me, Michael? I asked, and the question was real. I wanted to know, did you visit me when I had pneumonia last winter? Did you call me on my birthday? Or did Brenda send a text 2 days later? When was the last time you asked me a question about myself that wasn't followed by a request for money or a signature? He had no answer. He just stood there, sputtering. You didn't do this to us, I said, standing up from the table. I did this for me, and for the land. You wanted the farm. Well, it's safe now. It will be here, just like this, long after we are all gone. No subdivisions, no clear-cutting, just the oaks and the creek and the quiet. My great-grandfather will be pleased. I'll walk past them, toward the front door. I have a reserved life estate, I said, my back to them. I'll live here until I die. Nothing will change for me, but everything has changed for you. You will have to build your own legacy now. I suggest you start with something other than greed. I open the front door. The key you have will no longer work after today. I'm having the locks changed this afternoon. Please leave it on the table on your way out. I stepped out onto the porch. The cool morning air felt clean. I didn't look back. I just stood there listening. I heard a choked sob from Brenda. I heard Michael slam his briefcase onto the kitchen table. I heard a string of curses. Then I heard the screen door open and slap shut. Their car door slammed. The engine roared to life, and the sound of tires spitting gravel faded down the long driveway. And then there was peace. A profound, ringing silence filled only by the wind in the pines and the cawing of the crows in the north pasture. I hadn't realized how much noise they made in my life until it was gone. The days that followed were the quietest I had ever known. The phone did not ring. No angry texts appeared. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean. The locksmith came that afternoon, a young man with tattoos on his arms who worked with quiet efficiency. He handed me a set of new, shiny keys. They felt solid and unfamiliar in my hand. A key to my own life. I began a new routine. I woke with the sun, made my coffee, and sat on the porch, watching the light move across the fields. I wasn't watching for flaws anymore, for work that needed to be done. I was just watching, seeing the beauty of it, the way the mist settled in the low spots, the way the deer came to the edge of the woods at dusk. I spent my time in the workshop, not fixing things for other people, but building things for myself. I built a set of bookshelves for the living room. I built a new, sturdy bench for the porch. I took my time, enjoying the process, the feel of the wood the precision of the tools. My father was right. You let the tool do the work. A week later, a woman from the Park Service came out. Her name was Anya. She was young, energetic, and had a doctorate in botany. She walked the property with me, her eyes wide with wonder. She didn't see acreage or property value. She saw a climax forest of old-growth hardwoods. She saw a pristine wetland habitat. She saw a rare species of orchid growing by the creek. She saw everything I saw and more. "This place is a treasure, Mr. Miller," she said, her voice filled with genuine reverence. "You have no idea what a gift this is." "I think I do," I said. Sarah drove out on the weekends. We didn't talk about Michael or Brenda. We talked about the farm. I showed her things my father had shown me. How to identify the birds by their songs. Which mushrooms were safe to eat. The history of every stone wall and every crooked tree. I was passing down the legacy after all, but not the way I had intended. I was giving her the knowledge, the connection, the soul of the place. The land itself would belong to everyone, but its stories would belong to her. One Saturday, we were fixing the fence in the west pasture, the one I'd been putting off. It was hard work, but was good work. The sun was warm on our backs. "Are you happy, Grandpa?" she asked out of the blue. I stopped, leaning on a fence post. I considered the question. Happy wasn't the right word. Happiness felt temporary, flighty. What I felt was deeper, more solid. "I'm steady," I said. "I feel steady. Like this post. Set deep in the ground. I know where I am, and I know what I'm here for," she smiled, and I saw her grandmother in that smile. "Steady is good," she said. "Steady is better than happy." A month after my decision, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, expensive stationery. The return address was Michael's. I recognized his handwriting, the impatient, forward-slanting scrawl. I held it for a long time. I didn't know what it could be. A threat of legal action? A final, bitter screed? An apology? I didn't open it. I walked into the living room and placed the letter on the mantel, propped up against one of the empty picture frames. It sits there still. Maybe one day I'll read it. Maybe I won't. The choice is mine. The door to reconciliation is not locked and barred. It's just closed. It is up to him to learn how to knock, not with a key, but with a humble hand. It is up to me to decide if I will answer. My life is quiet now. It is my own. The land is safe. My legacy is not one of wealth or property passed down to ungrateful hands. It is the shade of an old oak tree, offered freely to any stranger who needs to rest. It is the silence of 500 acres of wild land, preserved in perpetuity. It is the quiet dignity of a man who, in the final act of his life, chose to own himself. Some might call what I did an act of revenge. They would be wrong. Revenge is a hot, messy, angry thing. This was not that. This was an act of peace. My peace, earned with a lifetime of silence, and purchased with a single, clear, and final word. No, it's a powerful word. I recommend you learn to use it. If this story found you, if it resonated in some quiet place in your own life, I hope you know you're not alone. There is strength in stillness. There is power in choosing your own peace over someone else's noise. Share this if you feel someone else needs to hear it. Sometimes, the quietest voice is the one that needs to be heard the most.